Today we're going to talk about 3D printing and 3D modeling. Many of you might have already heard about these words, 3D modeling, 3D printing. Some people have an idea what it is, but some people know that you can build 3D parts with it, but they have no idea how it works and how a printer can print three-dimensional object. Today I'm going to explain you how it really works. Let's take an example of a regular printer which prints a piece of paper. So when it prints a piece of paper using this print head that you see right here. So once I turn on this printer, you'll see the print head moves the same way the print head moves when it's printing a piece of paper. So what it does, it sprays the ink on the piece of paper, and while it's spraying the ink, it makes the characters that we are looking for. Let's imagine if it sprayed the ink in multiple layers. It puts one layer, then it puts another layer, and puts another layer on top. That's exactly how the 3D printers work. They make one layer, obviously a little bit thicker layer than the ink here, but then they put another layer on top and another layer on top till you get a three-dimensional object. Let's now get to seeing a 3D printer. So what I have here is a Delta 3D printer. So why is it called the Delta printer is because it has a delta shaped arms which make the extruder move, and that's how it prints. Think of this just like a print head we had on a conventional regular paper printer. In the paper printer, the head went around and printed something. The same way you can think of this as the head which prints the object that we are trying to print. Obviously we are not going to have an ink here because ink is not going to give us that height, and that ink is not thick enough to make something into a three-dimensional object. Instead, what we use is called a filament. The filament can be made out of plastic. The plastic filaments are called ABS, and they can be made out of corn. They're called PLA. This particular filament is made out of PLA. They look the same, but one is made out of plastic and one is made out of a corn material. This one is made out of corn material and it's called a PLA. So the filament goes in, it goes through this tube right here and gets into this extruder. What happens in the extruder is that the filament gets heated up, so obviously it's going to melt. Once it melts, it comes out of this nozzle, and whatever we are trying to print, that filament is going to come down and try to print that layer by layer. It's going to put the first layer down, and then once it is done with the first layer, it's going to print on top of the first layer and make the second layer, and then on top of that make the third layer, and so on and so forth. So as you can imagine, over time those layers are going to grow and make it into a three-dimensional object. So that's how the 3D printing works. So what I have here is another FDM printer. The printer I showed you before was also an FDM printer. What FDM printer means? Fused Deposition Modeling Printer. The Delta printer we saw before is also an FDM printer. This is a Cartesian printer, is also an FDM printer because they release the filament and they print layer by layer by melting the filament and printing one layer on top of other. So they are both similar kind of printers but a little bit different. That's Delta, this is Cartesian. In the Cartesian printer we have a print head which goes left and right, front and back, and there's also a print bed which goes up and down. In the other Delta printer, the bed was fixed, only the extruder was moving. Here the extruder also moves, but only moves in two directions, front and back, left and right, and the bed also moves, and it prints layer by layer. These kind of printers are said to be more precise and accurate, but they are not meant for speed, while as the Delta printers may not be as accurate, but they are considered to be speedier. They're considered to be faster. This particular printer is an enclosed printer. Most of the printers are not enclosed, so you can completely enclose it. So there's a carbon fiber filter, so keeps the fumes, filters the fumes, and it's safe, completely safe to use around inside the room. So this is an enclosed Cartesian printer. So I'm going to show you some filaments. So this is a filament that that is being used. This is a PLA. It says PLA on top. The only way I can tell whether it's a PLA or an ABS is by looking at the label. It also tells us the melting point and all that, which you will set in the printer when you are using it with the printer. So to give you a feel of how the PLA looks, so this is the PLA, this is what gets melted and makes it into a three-dimensional object. So let me pick another one of those. They come in different colors depending on what color object you want to make. So this is another one. It's a burgundy red PLA, 500 grams. Again, so this is the PLA that we have here. Okay. So give you some objects that we have printed using these printers. So look at this tank. This was printed in multiple pieces and then it was put together, right? Some of them were glued together and some of them are just sitting on top. So this is one of them. This is called the Benji. This is usually a very common test print that people do because it has lots of curved surfaces and so forth. And this is to test the printers, people just print this, and it also looks pretty cool. So this is something that we printed on just yesterday. This is a skyscraper that was printed on one of the Delta printers, and so forth. So if you have any questions, do let us know. I hope you enjoyed this video on 3D printers.